Hi, my name's Stephanie, and I have the pleasure today of sharing my testimony with you about how I came to know the Lord and a few examples of His goodness towards me over the years. I hope that it's all going to be very encouraging for you, as a reminder to you that if He can do it for me, He can do it for you too. Nothing's impossible for our God. So I live down here in Surrey in the UK. My husband pastors a disciples church down here. He's been doing that for about 3 years now, and we have 5 lovely children. The story of my conversion goes back about 20 years though, when I was backpacking in Mexico. I was about 24 at the time. I really didn't have much purpose or direction for my life at that stage. I had no concept of spirituality or of God really. I just thought, okay, we live and we die, and that's all there is to it. So I was quite focused on getting the most fun out of life and having as many experiences as I could along the way. And that took me to Mexico. I wasn't originally planning to go to Mexico. I was actually heading to Peru. I just wanted to go and see the Incas. I thought it was an incredible place to go and visit. But the Lord brought me to Mexico because He had better plans for my life. So yeah, I was following the Backpackers Trail, going from Mexico City down through Acapulco, down through Oaxaca, and onto a lovely little town called San Cristobal down in the south in Chiapas. And it was there that I met my husband just a few weeks after starting my travels. He was working in a bar, I was drinking in the bar, just living the wild life really. Yeah, and I don't mean tigers and things. We were living a fairly self-destructive life. Lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, promiscuity, and so on was all involved. But you know, at the time, I thought I was having the time of my life. Anyway, we got on really well. We moved in together, and after about a year, we had our first daughter, Kira, and that's really the point when God started kind of knocking on the door of my heart. Really, He really started waking me up to the reality of things. So when Kira was born, we took her home, and the day after she started developing mini convulsions. So she just kind of started twitching down one side. Her hand would kind of tense up, and her leg and everything. And I said to Vlad, hey, is this normal? Because she was our first baby, we had no experience. He was like, is this what babies do? And he asked his mum, and she said, no, not at all. Take her back to hospital. So we went rushing back, and they whisked her away from us, and they started doing all sorts of tests. And it turned out that she'd been bleeding in her brain. Her brain was swollen because she hadn't received enough oxygen during the birth. Yeah, that was a whole other story. Birth stories are quite amazing things, aren't they? But yeah. So she was in pretty bad shape. The doctors, they didn't give us any hope for her. They said that she would likely die, and if she didn't die, they said she'd be incapacitated for her whole life, just stuck in a wheelchair without being able to do anything. At the time, I really didn't speak very much Spanish because my husband spoke some English. We tended to speak English to each other because it was the easy option for me. I was a bit too shy to speak Spanish. I felt like people were laughing at me and stuff, so I kind of avoided it. So we were in Mexico. I'm in a foreign land. I don't speak the language very well. My daughter was gravely ill. I just had the baby. And actually over there, I mean, the medical system is very, very different. And so there were no beds for mums to stay with their babies, no comfy, single rooms like they have here in the hospitals in the UK. I actually was sleeping on the floor of the hospital in the hallway the day after I had Kira, and so it was pretty tough. But I found myself kind of falling into a hole of self-pity. I was very good at that. I'd been practicing it my whole life. So when these circumstances happened, that was my go-to. Poor me, poor me. What will I do? Whereas my now husband, we weren't married at the time, his parents were Christians. They were born-again Christians. They'd been praying for him for a number of years. They'd been praying for me since they met me. And yeah, there was one moment when I went back to the UK and to say goodbye to my family and tell them I was going to go to Mexico for a long time. And they were praying, saying, Lord, if she's just going to get in the way of our son's salvation, please don't bring her back. And they were very encouraged when I arrived back earlier than expected, because they took that as a sign that the Lord was going to do something in my life as well. So my husband had heard the gospel many years before, but he'd completely rejected it at this stage. But yeah, in this moment, someone came to the hospital and they said they had a word from the Bible for him that really just touched his heart, and he just thought, do you know what? If my daughter dies now, she will go to heaven, she will be with the Lord, but what about me? And he just realized that his life was messed up and he needed to be restored in his relationship with God. So unbeknownst to me, he was, working at the time in a school. He would go to work and then come and see us in the hospital afterwards. And for 3 days, he fasted and prayed, and he was asking for forgiveness from God. And then on the third day, he came in to the hospital, and he was, there was something really, really different about him in his face, in his expressions. And so he told me that Jesus had forgiven him, and that really just, it was like an electric shock. Because although I had this kind of awareness, people had started talking to me about Jesus, so I was kind of aware that people did think that. I had no idea that he was actually looking for God. And, still in my mind, Jesus was almost like this fictional Santa Claus character that someone had made up somewhere along the way. So, in my hole of self-pity, I then started to think, oh my gosh, he's gone and lost it now as well. Thankfully he hadn't, but that was what I felt at the time. And I remember just noticing a real change, like deep in his eyes. You could see it was like he'd gone from black to white. There was a darkness that had been lifted about him. And of course, I hated him for it, because he was at peace and he was happy, and I was absolutely miserable, and I was frightened, and I didn't know where to go or what to do. And so, I didn't really believe it. I was like, that can't be real. It's got to be fake. And so I did my utmost to try and make him trip up. I was nasty. I was just trying to poke him, just to say, it can't be real. Okay, your true colors have got to come through somehow. But it just didn't work. He really, really was a changed person. So for me, I was just like, wow, maybe this God stuff is real. But then a whole series of miraculous events were what God used to kind of really open my eyes up and say to me, hello, I'm here, come and see me. And one of those, like I said, our daughter, she was gravely ill. She was very, very ill. And the Lord healed her. He healed her completely. So after about 3 weeks of being in hospital, she needed to have an MRI scan done. And they said, well, we're not sure that she's actually going to come through this, because the anesthetic might actually kill her. But we need to see what's going on in there. So she had the MRI done, and the doctor came out and he said to my husband, we have no idea what's happened, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with her. And the scan showed that there wasn't even any scar tissue. There was no remnant of anything ever having been wrong with her, even though we had the prior scans done that said that, that clearly showed that there was bleeding and that there was swelling. So it was an incredible miracle that the Lord performed, and she's been perfectly fine ever since that. She's just turned 18. On top of that, just thinking back now to all the different things that happened. So on top of that, right from when she was taken away from me, I wasn't able to breastfeed her. She had problems with her stomach, so they were feeding her through a tube. And for weeks, I couldn't feed her, and then they gave me the opportunity to, and the Lord preserved my milk for her. And it's just such a sweet detail, that he took care of. He knew that I wanted to breastfeed her, and he allowed that. So I can just see left, right, and center these acts of mercy from the Lord, and I'm starting to think, must be something more out there. It's not all about me. I was so self-focused, so self-centered, that it really took a lot, I think, for the Lord to get my eyes off of me and onto him. And I'm so glad he did. Let me just scroll down, remember where I've got to. I don't want to miss anything, because God deserves the glory for all of it. Okay, so on top of the other miracles that I saw, the Lord also was miraculously providing financially for the things that we needed. Her hospital treatment, after being in the hospital for over 3 weeks, it ended up costing us something ridiculous, like less than £20. It was insane. I mean, they pulled out a file about this big of things that they'd done to her and the treatments that she'd had. And yeah, the Lord just saying again, I'm merciful, turn to me. And at the same time, I had different people. So I had my mother-in-law, she would talk to me and just try and guide me to God. And then it seemed like wherever I would go, there would be people wanting to talk to me. And even though I didn't speak Spanish very well, I seemed to always get the gist. It was like he knew how to make me understand. Language isn't a barrier for God when he wants to reach someone. So, you know, I'm seeing all these wonderful things, and that's really starting to make me think about things, but I'm not really sure what to do with it all. I start reading the Bible privately. I don't really want to show anyone that I'm reading the Bible because I'm a little bit proud, teensy bit, maybe a teensy bit. Very proud. And I just wanted the space to be able to look for him myself. We went back to our little flat. It was quite funny. My husband, he was so passionate about God once he'd found him that he would literally follow me around our little flat with the Bible, and he'd be saying to me, Steph, you gotta look for him. You gotta repent. You need Jesus. And it was quite frustrating at the time because I was like, I want to find him, but I can't find him. And one day we had a visitor come. He was a fellow believer, and he said to me, he quoted a verse actually from Jeremiah. Let me just have a look at my notes where it's from. Jeremiah 29:13. It says, "And you'll seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." And I remember at the time just like, what does that mean? What does it mean, search with your heart? I'm English. We don't do things like that. We have to see concrete evidence to know that it's real. But it really stuck with me. If you seek me, you'll find me when you search for me with all my heart, with all your heart. And I kind of fumbled along for a few weeks, trying to talk to God and just really kind of understanding that my life was in a mess. My heart wasn't in a good place at all. But not yet finding him. And I was so frustrated. I was so frustrated. And there was the one day, the best day of my life, when I was just under my duvet, crying my eyes out, saying to him, where are you? Like, if you're there, where are you? Like, yeah. And I was desperate. I was so desperate. And in my desperation, in my crying out, he really did become my greatest need. I really was searching for him with all my heart. He was all I wanted to know. I heard him say, and this is a funny thing because I didn't hear an audible voice saying to me out loud, but I heard in my heart, he said, here I am. And he just smothered me with peace. It almost felt like a hug. It was just the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. He said, here I am. And I remember just like that, my desperation and my tears of like, where are you? They turned to tears of joy and elation and excitement. And I was practically like bouncing around the room, just crying and crying still because I was so happy. he'd responded to me. And that, yeah, blew my mind, absolutely blew me away. So, I went and told Vlad, and he was like, he was blown away as well that, God had responded so quickly. And I think so our daughter was born. Vlad was saved a couple of weeks after that. We brought her back a couple of weeks after that. And then it would have been a couple of weeks after that that the Lord saved me as well. These things all happened very quickly, in succession of one another. And we started then attending church. You hadn't been to a church before that, but we started going to his mum and dad's home group that they had in their house. It was about an hour or so drive away. And anyway, a missionary came down from the north of the country, and he was doing like a 3-day conference on sin, the wages of sin, and the freedom that we have in Christ. And so Vlad and I, at that moment in that conference, we both experienced like this complete understanding of how it was possible that we could have been forgiven, and what Jesus had to go through for that. And again, just crying our eyes out, because a sense of sorrow, deep sorrow that he'd had to suffer that for us, and then just deep gratitude that he'd done it for us, and that we'd been able to understand that, and of course the freedom that brings. So yeah, life was never the same again after that. And so I started reading my Bible. I started off in the Gospels. I read the Gospels a few times around, and then I went all the way through the New Testament, and then I started in the Old Testament. And it wasn't until I got right the way through to the book of Isaiah that I came to chapter 58 and verse 9, and it says, "Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, 'Here I am.'" And man, I remember just bursting inside, like, he did that to me? Wow, he did that to me. And so, yeah, remembering this testimony is so special to me, because you remember the joy of your salvation. Many a times throughout my walk, I've prayed to the Lord, restore to me the joy of your salvation, because as we're walking along in the valley of the shadow of death, we can often get weighed down and lose our joy. So remembering where he took me from and all the things he did to get me here. Oh man, there's nothing like that to restore your joy, really. God's done so many things throughout my life, but there were a few particular points that Bethany wanted me to touch on. And one of them was that 10 years later, nearly 10 years later, we moved back to the UK. We had the opportunity to come back and visit family, and hadn't seen them for a long time. I had some relationships that I needed to restore. So the Lord provided, he brought us back. But I didn't have any plans on staying here. I thought we'll just go and see everyone, that's lovely, and then I'll go back to Mexico, because I quite like it in Mexico. But my husband thought otherwise, and he sought the Lord, and he understood that actually we needed to stay. And I was very reluctant about it, and not very happy at all. I didn't get my way, and it led to a really difficult, dark period in my life, because I didn't deal with it quickly. So at this point, we now had 3 children, and during the second winter that we were here, I entered into a period of depression, and I really battled with thoughts that were just bothering me day and night. Thoughts like, you don't need to be here, no one would miss you if you were gone. Really nice thoughts like that. And they were so insistent, and they brought me down really low. And if I go back to talking to you about how self-centered I was prior to becoming a Christian, how self-focused I was, and how I would just thrive off of these pity parties, well, I found myself back in that place again, and it was like, You know, nobody cares what you think. Your husband doesn't care what you think. You know, we're here now, and that's that. And so I really started to get a sense of just feeling like I was drowning in these kind of self-loathing thoughts. And I got to the point where I was just like, I cannot do anything about it. It was almost like my brain was on fire. And so I called out to the Lord, and I had this real strong image of that moment when Peter, who was drowning, just shot his hand out and cried out and said, Jesus, save me. And that is literally what I did. I cried, Lord, save me. And, you know, I explained, I can't do anything about these thoughts. And he knows we need him. But anyway, I went to bed that night and woke up a new woman in the morning that he just completely took it away from me. The struggle that I'd been having for all this time. And then after that, he then started to show me how I'd managed to get myself there. You know, I think a lot about us as sheep and how we're so prone to just be distracted and wander off the wrong path and very quickly get ourselves into trouble, get caught up in brambles and bushes and things, and call out to the shepherd to come and save us. My problem was that what I saw was the root of this was the fact that I was basically having a tantrum because I didn't get my own way. I wanted to be somewhere else, and the Lord had said, no, I want you here right now. And I wasn't content about that. I allowed bitterness in, and these are just, you know, making the door wide open for the enemy to come in and wreak havoc with our hearts and our minds. So I learned a really important lesson, a really, really important lesson from that situation. And just one more lesson of the many that the Lord was going to be showing me throughout my walk. I think it's just important to know that sometimes we'll come across things in our lives that we think, how on earth, why am I struggling with this? This has never been an issue for me, or something like that. Or you might feel like, but I've been a Christian for so long. How can I possibly be struggling with this now? And you know, I think it's all just part of God's grace, bringing things to light. He puts us in certain circumstances so that the things that are in the deepest recesses of our hearts get brought out, and so that we can deal with them, so that he can deal with them. So it's a good thing. But yeah, correction's not usually a comfortable thing as it's happening. But I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the Lord's correction. So that was about 10 years ago when we came here. If we fast forward another 10 years, I found myself this year struggling with something that I'd not experienced before either, really, and that was anxiety. You know, we're in 2020. The world's gone absolutely mad. There's so much insecurity about, you know, the present and the future. There's conflict left, right, and center. The news is all full of doom and gloom, and it's fear-mongering, and nobody really knows what's happening out there. Nobody knows what to believe. So things are getting shaken. And just in general in my life, you know, at this point, I've now got 5 children. I'm a pastor's wife. We homeschool, and you know, we also raise puppies. So at that time, I had a house full of puppies as well, and so my workload, my stress load was probably higher than I should have let it get to, but I hadn't realized. And then coupling it with all sorts of other things that were happening in the world around me in a bigger sense, I started to notice in myself that I was getting this sense of fear and dread about just everyday things, you know, even just driving in the car with my husband. If I was distracted and I'd be looking down to do something, the moment I looked up, there'd always be something happening that would just make me go, you know, and I'd have that horrible sense of adrenaline just shoot through my body and my stomach tightening. And I found that throughout life I was just getting this continual sensation for everything. The post would come through the door. I'd be like, oh no, what's that? I wonder what's happening. Is everything okay? Everything, worrying, like just completely unnecessarily. And then that progressed, and then I ended up waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to go back to sleep, and concerned, and I don't know, my puppies are making a lot of barking, maybe the neighbors are going to be unhappy and complain. I was just worrying about such unnecessary things. But as it continued, I said to my husband, I have this sense, like I feel like I'm getting squeezed by a boa constrictor, and every time I breathe air, just kind of like, I just feel like I get squeezed tighter and tighter, and I just feel like I don't understand even why I'm feeling like this. And where did I go? The only place I could go. It's like, God, again, I don't even know how I got myself here, but please help. Please help me. You're so good to me. Just help me. And he steps in and saves the day every time. I spent a few days fasting, praying. I was reading the word and what he says about anxiety, listening to podcasts, reading books. I shared with some friends what I was going through, and that was one point in particular that was different to my big struggle with depression 10 years earlier, was that we'd come over from Mexico and we still hadn't found fellowship at this point. We were still kind of visiting churches and sort of saying, okay, well, where are we supposed to be, Lord? Where do you want us? And so we weren't in a close fellowship. I didn't have any other Christian friends here that I could share my struggles with, that could pray for me, that could build me up, apart from my husband. And I didn't really want to talk to him, because I thought like he was the cause of my problem at the time. But in contrast, when I'm going through these issues of anxiety this time, I have a really close friend that I could turn to, and I shared everything with her, and she was praying for me. She was sending me helpful material as well. And just knowing that not having to keep it all inside, not having to keep it to myself, makes so much difference. So I was listening to podcasts, reading the Bible, and the Lord was showing me, he was reminding me, don't be anxious for anything. It's like, I know it says that, Lord, but how do I actually not be anxious? Well, the antidote is trust, isn't it? The antidote is just to trust that he's got everything in hand. He reminds me that sufficient for each day is its own trouble. I need to stop worrying about an unknown future. He has always been and will always be faithful. And those reminders of his faithfulness are basically what eased the anxiety, and taking control of my thoughts as well. Being aware of them and not just letting myself get kind of led down the garden path by one of my fearful negative thoughts, or but actually kind of doing what the Bible says and taking it captive and like submitting it to God and say, okay, is this a godly thought? Is this helpful? Is this going to build me up? Is this going to be helpful? If not, then do something about it. In a practical sense, he was saying, what are you consuming? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you hearing? What are you feeding your soul? Is it things to feed your fear or things to feed your trust? And so being aware of that, I kind of stopped. I remember when the coronavirus situation first kicked off, I remember looking at this worldometer right in the beginning. Vlad was in Mexico at the time, and I was at home just like, what on earth is going on in the world, Lord? Like, is the church about to be shut down? My husband's in another country. Is he even going to get back? And looking at these worldometers and just watching the numbers rise. The numbers are going up and up and up. And it was about 2 weeks into it all, I think it was, I realised, I was just like, what are you doing? Stop looking at the numbers. The numbers don't mean anything, really. Look at God. Just keep looking to God. And so once again, he reminded me of that. Practical things. Get some rest. Ease the workload. Pay attention to this day of rest that he's given me and actually make use of it. So here I am on my day of rest. Rest days is nice. I mean, it's so good to be sharing my testimony with you. Knowing my limits as well. I think I'm always really quick to say yes and to put more on my plate and just keep adding and adding and adding. And that just increases the stress load, which in turn increases the anxiety, But ultimately it's about remembering that I have victory in Jesus, and nothing can take that away from me. So it's been a very fruitful year in my soul in terms of the Lord strengthening my faith in him. And well, I pray that my testimony would encourage all of you as well, just to remember that our God is so good and he loves us so much. We can turn to him for anything. Nothing is too great or too difficult for him to deal with, even though they may feel out of control for us. So God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon with Bethany.